All right, great. Thank you everybody for taking the time out of your day to attend today's Brainfuse webinar. So today we're going to be going over all of the services at Brainfuse made available to Eastern Florida State College students. For context, for those of you who might not be familiar with Brainfuse already, we're a company that provides assistive services to students at schools and patrons at libraries and other similar institutions throughout the country in academic and job assistive and even veterans career services throughout the country. But with that in mind, today, we're going over our suite of academic services, which includes live on-demand tutoring, in addition to asynchronous tutoring support and really full, complete customization and integration with not only Eastern Florida State College, but also with your own tutoring program and academic success center. So I'm going to be going over all of the ins and outs of these different services and features made available to students today. And with that, I'll be showing you some kind of lesser known areas of Brainfuse where students can really benefit from knowing where these features are made available, showing you all of the places that we've really extensively customized this platform to align with your needs and your school's different purposes. But with that, with kind of the preamble out of the way, likely the first and most important question for anyone's purposes would be, how do our students access Brainfuse? And so in this case, probably very similar to your previous provider, Brainfuse was set up with Canvas single sign-on in mind. So in this case, all your students need to do is sign on into their Canvas account. From there, they'll find a link to Brainfuse online tutoring, either included under their course or in a resources tab. Ultimately, the location of this is chosen by the LMS administrators at the program. But either way, once your student clicks on that link, they're brought directly to this page that they see here. This is the Brainfuse homepage. And even if they've never been here before, your logo is right at the top of the page, so they'll know they're in a somewhat familiar place. And with that in mind, from there, they are all set to access all of the different services and features made available to them. With that, I want to call your attention just briefly and directly to what we refer to at Brainfuse as a student's account features. So these can be found by the student hovering over their name or username as it appears just over here where it says Brainfuse. By hovering over that, you'll see just underneath these account features open up. And so these different account features you see here relate in one way or another to one or more of the different services provided. So as I go through those today, I'll do my best to kind of show you how they relate to these account features and what your students can do to get the most out of their access to Brainfuse altogether. But with that noted, let's go ahead and jump into it properly. So Brainfuse is primarily broken down between two sections. We have our expert help tools, which are located really front and center once your student accesses the platform. These include our live help tool and the writing lab just over here. From there, we also have our academic tools, which you can see by scrolling a bit further down on the page, and these include a number of different options that expand beyond just our on-demand immediate service assistance options. With that, you'll see those same headers are included at the top of the page here, and you can actually access any of those tools individually by clicking on the link that appears under the dropdown if you'd like to. With that, just before proceeding into the first tool properly, I'd like to note that there is a simple search bar up here in the case of any students who access Brainfuse for the first time, who might be looking for assistance in a particular subject or topic, and they're not exactly certain which of our topics and subjects in live help to choose from, or they just haven't looked yet and are curious if we offer the tutoring. They can go ahead and begin typing in a keyword for their subject or class or topic they're working on here, and from there, Brainfuse will do its best to pair the student with the most appropriate live help tutoring subject of their choice. But with that, let's go ahead and proceed properly into Brainfuse's first tool, arguably one of our more popular tools. This is the Live Help area just over here. Live Help is where your students can connect one-to-one and on demand with one of our live assistance subject experts. And so in order to do this, all the student would need to do is select the topic and then subject that they'd like to receive tutoring in. For the sake of today's demo, I'm actually going to choose the English topic, and I'm going to go ahead and choose ESL for the sake of example. And so the reason for that is because we customize the live help area extensively for EFSC to make sure that our live help on-demand tutors are only available outside of the access hours for your own academic success center tutoring. So while the school is available and in place and ongoing at the time, our tutors will not be accessible to students with a few exceptions. So just to clear that up, in this case, our ESL tutors, in addition to our computer science tutors and our nursing tutors, are all available 24/7 and can be accessed anytime, no matter when a student logs in, even if that's during school hours, in fact. Beyond that, if a student would like to access any of our other academic subjects, whether those are our other English topics, math, or science topics, whatever they might be, all of those topics, so as not to conflict with the Academic Success Center, are available from between 4 p.m. and 8 a.m. from Monday through Friday, so between the hours outside of school. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, the subjects are available as a standard. And so with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and connect to one of our ESL tutors so we are able to connect within these school hours. If your students would ever like to check to see when these tutoring subjects are available, they can actually go right ahead and click on Check Tutor Availability just here. Again, as I explained, our 24/7 subjects are ESL, our computer science topics, and nursing, whereas the others have been made available only outside of the school's hours for the sake of your Academic Success Center and other programs. In addition, you'll also see a quick FAQ link up here. We're working in tandem with EFSC pretty strongly to make sure that this FAQ link includes more updated information, but at this time it actually links directly to your Academic Success Center page and other information that's available directly through there. So there's a lot of different areas where this has been integrated and students can access details about the Success Center even straight from Brainfuse. With that, one final area to note before proceeding in is the preferences area just down here. So in this case, if you're a student who would like to connect to a Spanish-speaking tutor in any of our academic subjects, you are able to by clicking on this checkbox just here. So any of our subjects, chemistry, any science subject, any math subject, all of these have a Spanish-speaking tutor available at minimum to assist your students when they're available. So with that in mind, if you have any students who primarily speak Spanish and might have an easier time working in a math session with a Spanish-speaking tutor, this option is here for them. The same applies for the tutoring with audio option here. If your students would like to connect to an audio-enabled tutor, they can click on this checkbox here to do so and enter that priority queue. With that in mind, if they'd like, they can not choose this option altogether and just go ahead and connect to one of our standard default chat tutors. Sometimes by luck of the draw, they'll connect to an audio-approved tutor even without connecting on the checkbox. But if that's your preference and you'd like to speak with a tutor over audio, you can go ahead and choose that. Since I'll be talking over this entire demonstration, and just so I can show you folks the whiteboard that we work with all of our one-to-one sessions in, I'd like to go ahead and just show you how that works by going ahead and clicking on Connect. So once a student chooses their live help topic and subject, it can sometimes take about a minute the first time that a user goes to connect with one of our tutors. But as you can see, it's taken us just under a few seconds. And that's about the average amount of time students will wait to connect to a tutor is under 15 seconds from when they click on that Connect link. From there, they're brought in here to the Brainfuse whiteboard. This is where all of our live help sessions take place through, and in fact was included throughout a number of different areas of Brainfuse to give your students some expanded options. But over here on the right-hand side is the chat area, and I'm just going to use this chat area to let the tutor know that since this is a demo session, there's no need for them to actually tutor us today. With that in mind, on the right-hand side, this is where the majority of those interactions between tutors and students take place, between their messages exchanged in the chat area. But with that, you'll also see when you have connected to a tutor with audio enabled, you'll see a phone icon just up here, which will allow you to connect over voice over IP, or you can also call into a toll-free conference line or have that conference line call you directly. You can also enable screen sharing anytime just by clicking on this link up here. So if you prefer not to kind of work in the interactive space of the whiteboard over here properly, you can go right ahead and show off the screen that you're working on your device directly if that's the easiest for your purposes. But with that noted, on the left-hand side over here, this much larger space of the whiteboard is really the whiteboard proper of our online classroom. And using the different tools that you can see in the vertical and horizontal taskbars above here, you'll be able to interact in this space with your tutor as you'd like to. For example, you can draw by default using the free-handed drawing tool that's selected by default when you begin a session. You can also, just clicking down here to show you the eraser tool, you can remove any small portions of the screen or correct any small errors that might have been made. With that, you'll note some of the tools in the horizontal taskbar above here actually changed to accommodate when I chose a tool from the vertical taskbar. That's because some of these are context sensitive. So for example, some are actually permanent. So for example, you can actually change the color of anything you place on the whiteboard anytime. Drawings, text, images, erasings, whatever it might be, if there's anything that you'd like to adjust the color of, you can use the color wheel to do that. And typically our tutors do that by default, so it's easy to tell whose markings or whose writings on the whiteboard are whose as it fills up with more and more information. With that, the undo and redo functions on the whiteboard remain as well anytime you'd like to undo a mistake, or if it wasn't a mistake, if you'd like to redo it. And you can also clear the whiteboard of content at any time, either the current slide or essentially its current resting state, since the whiteboard can scroll infinitely to the right or down. Or you can clear the entirety of the board at any time. Just as a note, this will never remove any of the messages exchanged between you and your tutor. Those remain throughout the duration of your session in full. From there, heading back to the vertical taskbar over here, just over here we have the text tool. As the name implies, this allows you to begin writing on the Brainfuse whiteboard, and there's no limit to wherever you'd like to do this. You can simply click on the whiteboard and begin typing away to your heart's content. With that, you can also very easily copy and paste any text or images directly onto your whiteboard as well using your native keyboard shortcuts. So if you have a screenshot from a homework assignment you're working on or any text from a paragraph, you can easily include that right onto the whiteboard directly. You may have noticed when I chose the text tool, those other tools up here adjusted. So with the freehanded drawing and eraser tool, we had width options here so you can change the broad stroke of the marker or the eraser tool. With the text tool, you can then, if you'd like to, change any text you write into superscript, to subscript, or you can even change the font properties of said text, whether it be the font itself, its style, or its size. And again, our tutors will usually do this by default to make it easy to tell whose writing is whose as the whiteboard fills up with writing from both the tutor and the student. In addition to the text tool, just underneath, you'll see just here, we have the math equation editor tool. As the name implies, this allows you to include any kind of equation you might like to on the Brainfuse whiteboard, no matter how complex that equation might get, or no matter how many operations it might have. So with that in mind, if you have a complex equation that you're working on and you'd like to be able to include it onto the whiteboard without using the free-handed drawing tool, the equation editor is certainly your friend and includes a number of different functions as well, including trigonometric functions as well. With that, clicking on this check mark will add it directly onto the whiteboard for you and the tutor to work on. Although, as I say on almost every webinar, I do apologize if that equation does not really make sense. I was an English major, so that explains why. Beyond that, though, in addition to the equation editor, we also have a recently added graphing calculator tool to the Brainfuse whiteboard. So any of your students in statistics classes or other courses that might require graphing calculators, we have one built into the whiteboard. So you can work with your you can work with your tutors in a graphing calculator tool native into the whiteboard rather than having to find one elsewhere or work outside of the whiteboard and communicate with the tutor from there. In addition, we also have these two simple options here, the line tool and the shapes tool. Both of these allow you to drag and drop number and shaped options directly onto the whiteboard. So these can include lines like I've done here for underlining text or dividing up segments of the screen. We also, under the shapes tool, have arrows, circles, and other things that are pretty useful for notation purposes and so on. But with that in mind, I'll actually go ahead and clear the content of the whiteboard here just to show you that some of the shapes options actually include more advanced ones, including number lines, number graphs, and even polyhedral shapes. Many of these can even be customized before placing them. So the number graph, you can adjust the minimums, maximums, and intervals of either of its axes. And then, yeah, just like the line tool, it's as simple as dragging and dropping it onto the whiteboard, which could be especially useful for students who work on problems like this and have a much easier time working in this sort of visual setting with the full graph to plot out so they can work on their problems in the format that works best for them. In addition to these various tools that we showed off in the kind of interactive whiteboard space, if you have any students who are interested in accessing Brainfuse through their mobile devices or tablets, we would definitely recommend they take a look at the Brainfuse Help Now app. This is an app that's available for free through both the Apple and Google Play stores, and it allows your students to access all of the same tools and features of Brainfuse through their mobile devices. One of the ways it's been optimized for mobile device users is that app users who access the live help tutoring area to communicate with our tutors have access to a unique feature to the app, which you can see an advertisement for just over here, known as the Snap and Send tool. This allows app device users to access their device's native camera and take a picture of whatever they're working on right in front of them. And with that, they send that link off to the tutor at the click of a button. So if they're working on a math problem and they're stuck on that penultimate step, rather than having to transcribe all that information onto the whiteboard for the tutor's use, the student can instead take a picture and send it off to the click of a button so that the tutor doesn't even have to miss a beat. They can see exactly where they left off and what they need help with and work on them at the point they need the help, rather than having to be explained. Heading on back to the right-hand side to wrap up the whiteboard tutorial or demonstration, excuse me. With that, just down here, you'll see the paperclip icon, which should be pretty familiar to folks here already. Of course, this is the universal symbol for uploading a file. So whether you'd like to upload that file from your computer or device directly through the file upload link, or to share it from your Brainfuse Cloud Pack, you'll be able to in your session anytime. So the Cloud Pack is one of those account features I mentioned when we started today, but I'll be showing you folks as we reach the conclusion of today's webinar, more likely. With that, any of the messages exchanged in the chat area here, you can also translate anytime to any of the different languages available through Google Translate using the Brainfuse Translate tool just down here. So even if you don't connect to a Spanish-speaking tutor because Spanish is not your primary language outside of English and you have another language you're more comfortable in, you can actually translate any of those messages immediately if you'd like to for your ease. And so apart from the emoji icon down here, which will hopefully let you send a smile to your tutor when your session is all done, that about covers all of the interactive tools and other options available through the online classroom or the Brainfuse whiteboard, where all of our live help tutoring sessions take place through. So when your students are all done with these sessions, they can either click on the quit icon just up here, or they can close out the whiteboard altogether. Either option in this case is perfectly fine. To quickly go through this, just so you're aware, at the end of every one of a student's live help sessions, they're given the opportunity to leave Brainfuse any feedback that they might like to, whether those are technical issues or suggestions they have for us or for our tutors. And we even include our own contact information just here, both phone number and email address, in case your students might like to reach out to us directly. With that, they can answer a simple yes or no question, whether or not they were satisfied with their tutoring session, and if they do, they can then specify further feedback for us. With that, there are a number of questions, including whether they'd recommend the service to a friend, or if they thought the session would help improve their grade on their assignment or class. With that, if the student would like, they can leave final comments as well, but once they click on submit, that feedback is sent off to us at Brainfuse. Although the vast majority of the time, students tend not to complete these survey processes, we still like to make sure they're given the opportunity every single time to leave us that feedback whenever they like. They also have a few useful links as part of this process, including the option to email a copy of the chat log that took place to anyone they'd like to with a valid email address, whether that be themselves, a professor, a parent, or guardian, or whomever. They can also watch a full video playback of the live help session that just took place with the replay session link. This will not only show each of the messages exchanged in the chat area, but they'll also show all the steps taken on the whiteboard. So you can actually really see in detailed playback exactly all the steps you took on your live session if you'd like to include that as part of your survey process. And then finally, there's the download receipt link, which, as the name implies, allows you to download a PDF receipt for the live session that took place. This includes the tutor's information, the date and time and duration of the session, the subject that was tutored in, and this allows you to send this to a professor for extra credit or just to prove to somebody that you got tutoring when you said you did, perhaps. With that in mind, from here, the student can either click on the back button to go back to the Brainfuse homepage, or clicking here will also suffice. With that noted, one of the first account features I really would like to point out to you, since students certainly find it one of our most useful, is the My Past Sessions area just here. This is an area that your students can go to view all of the past tutoring sessions they've conducted on their Brainfuse account permanently. So even their very first tutoring session, many of our clients have been with us for a number of years and have had students working on Brainfuse from their freshman year all the way through to their senior year. Those seniors can watch playbacks for sessions that took place in their freshman year contiguously. They're available immediately for playback from the time the student completes their session, and they're able to watch these anytime they'd like to. In addition to watching the video playbacks for these sessions and viewing the date and time information and so on, they can also access the chat logs for those by clicking on the view transcript link just up here, and they can download the receipts for all these sessions anytime they'd like to. So rather than just doing that at the post-session survey process, these can be retrieved anytime for a student. Heading on back to the Brainfuse homepage, the next area I'd like to go over is certainly one of the areas of Brainfuse that we have most closely worked with the EFSC Academic Success Center to customize, and that's our Writing Lab, just over here. The Writing Lab is an asynchronous tutoring service that allows your students to submit papers to EFSC writing tutors and receive feedback within 2 operational days, aka days where the Academic Success Center is open. And so you actually see that noted for the student right on this page here. We customized the text of this page just to let them know that here you're able to get help from EFSC writing tutors, and they're excited to assist you from here. So really, the first step of the process is simply to click on Submit Paper. From there, you can actually specify the type of paper that is being submitted. And EFSC works pretty closely with us to make sure that these different paper types you see here and the further areas that you'll see in just a moment to make sure that these are really the best fits for your students and that they're able to really specify the kind of feedback they're looking for. So, for example, let's say I'm submitting an essay into the EFSC Writing Lab team. From there, once I've chosen that as the first step of the process, I can then, if I'd like to, select the course that I'm in. I can then provide directions to the tutor on how they can best assist us in the process. Again, whether that's specifically including notes on whether you need assistance in grammar primarily, or if that's a structural issue, whatever it might be. If there are any additional pieces of information that you can include, you can actually upload files to each of these sections. So it could be really useful context for the EFSC tutors conducting the best possible review for the student's purposes. From there, if there are any citation format requirements, you can include them here. You can also include from a number of different selection options here which specific areas you'd like the tutors to focus on. So you can choose up to 3 of these different examples, but in many cases, as I'm sure is the case with EFSC tutors, if nothing is selected here, then the tutor will likely defer to their own expertise and try to guide the student onto how to improve their paper for themselves based on criteria that they feel the student can use the most. From there, the final step is to include the document you'd like to submit to the EFSE tutors. So you can upload that document from your computer or device directly, from your Brainfuse Cloud Pack, which again we'll be explaining a bit later, or there's also a from whiteboard option. Although we wouldn't recommend using this at this time for the EFSE tutors, the best purposes for your example will be or best examples for your purpose would be the computer and Cloud Pack options. But from there, once you've uploaded that file, there's a section to include any final comments that you might have, and then finally, you can simply click on submit. From there, within those 2 operational days, you as a student can head on over to the My Message Center under your account features. It's here that you'll be able to retrieve any responses returned by the EFSE tutors from your submission. In fact, under the Message Center, similar to the My Past Sessions area, you'll see a full history of all the documents you've submitted to the Writing Lab and all the reviews you've had returned from it. And within this Message Center, you'll be able to see reviews returned by EFSE tutors, and you'll be able to click on the documents themselves and access those files directly. Just for the sake of example, I'd like to show you guys what a typical Brainfuse tutor writing lab review looks like. In this case, though, of course, let's note very especially, and I'd like to make this very clear, that EFSC tutors will actually be using a different response form and a different format from what we use at Brainfuse with our own tutors in the writing lab. This is just an example of what one of those documents might look like. Typically, they include a response form similar to this with feedback from the tutor up front, broken down typically into those organizational structures based on the the student's submission and their request. And then from there, typically, the tutors will then include the full text of the student's paper with their own in-text comments embedded. Of course, many of you folks on the webinar today are probably already very familiar with how EFSC tutors tend to structure and style their essay reviews. And if you're not, there are folks at the EFSC tutoring team who are certainly going to be more expert than I at explaining how they really tailor these reviews to students. But with that in mind, those reviews are going to be included immediately for your students to access within the My Message Center. So again, check back in after those 2 operational days for the Success Center between those Mondays and Thursdays, and check back into your Message Center to see the reviews returned by EFSC tutors. Again, our writing lab, certainly one of our flagship services, was one of those places we wanted to make sure that EFSC had full integration and customization so that your tutors were the ones who were housed here and could assist your students in the best way possible in these asynchronous writing lab reviews. So from there, having gone over the kind of main areas of the expert help area, let's head on down now to show you folks the academic tools. The first of which is our skill server. This is essentially Brainfuse's online content library. And it's where your students can go if they'd like to take a look at some of Brainfuse's in-house created content. This content includes academic test prep, text lessons, video lessons, and a whole lot more. Frankly, it's kind of easy to get lost within the skill server with the amount of content that's made available. But there are some ways it's been made a little bit easier for navigation. So for example, it's broken down into these different topics you see here. For example, we have college materials, including college entrance test prep and placement test materials, nursing school exam options, even graduate school entrance test prep, and a lot more. But clicking on through to the individual topic categories you see here under the lessons areas, you'll find other topics broken down into various subjects and their subcategories. So for example, under college math, you'll see we have statistics, linear algebra, calculus, and a number of different options here. With that, I'll just go ahead and click on through to pre-algebra to show you some of the materials we have available. Again, these include practice tests, text lessons, video lessons, interactive quizzes, mini quizzes, and a lot more. It is pretty easy to get lost in the skill server with the amount of materials that's available here. But with that, you do see the materials that I've already worked through have been noted by these icon changes in color. So the rest of the page appears in black and white, whereas the other materials I've worked through, the icons appear in the theme color of the page. And just so you're aware, in case a student accesses the skill server and is going through a content area where they are struggling and they would like to get help from one of Brainfuse's tutors through here, you'll see a link just up here to get live help. This is specific to any area of the skill server that has content paired with one of our available live help tutoring subjects. This is just to make sure that if students ever need assistance, they should never be more than one click away from that help when they need it. With that noted, though, many of Brainfuse's content areas actually provide a lot more detailed information for students than you might expect. In particular, our practice tests is where this really shines, for example. So, for example, when you complete a practice test with Brainfuse, students can typically expect to receive a score, although with a standard practice test, I should say, with other similar practice tests. But a score, frankly, does not really provide good enough information for a student on where they can improve and how this practice test is going to help them improve. So instead, I'm just going to click on through to this practice test that I've already previously taken, because that will actually show me the results of this test that I've taken. Not only does it give me a breakdown of all the questions I answered incorrectly, which I did on purpose, just to clarify. That was totally on purpose. But either way, beyond that, it shows me all of the questions I answered incorrectly. And rather than scoring me, instead, it provides a complete breakdown just underneath on all of the skills that were tested within the student's incorrectly answered questions. So they actually get immediate feedback on those exact skills areas that this practice test was testing them on and that they struggled in. And from there, they can identify lessons immediately in the previous section that are paired to these exact topic areas. They can even get live help from one of Brainfuse's tutors in this topic directly through this page if they'd like to. From there, they can even click on through to any one of the individual questions that they had. From there, they'll be able to see the correct answer along with the answer that they provided and an explanation for every single question. So they can actually get, even just in the document itself or the test itself, immediate help and assistance on exactly the step of a problem that they did incorrectly. As a shortcut, any students who are looking to take a look at some of the practice test results that they've had in the past without navigating fully into the skill surfer to find them can head on instead to the My Tests area under their account features here. So here will be a full record of all the tests students have taken on their Brainfuse account, along with the date the test was taken, the score they received. They can click through to the test name to see the full detailed results and the skills breakdown I showed you just before. And of course, you'll see the option to retake that exam as well. Now you'll notice here one of these options is not able to be retaken. So that actually segues us into the next area of Brainfuse's academic tools, specifically the Leap Learning Platform just over here. The Leap Learning Platform is sort of like a customized version of the Skill Surfer experience, primarily built around college readiness courses for students. This area is especially useful for students who are either remedial learners, who are returning to college after a long break perhaps, or entering college for the first time at some sort of deficit and might need to really brush up on some of those basic skills for math or reading and writing in college. And so with that in mind, each of these Leap Learning Platform courses that you see here begins with a diagnostic test to assess the student's skill level with respect to that skill. And so with that, that's why you saw under the My Tests area that one test was not able to be retaken. That was a diagnostic test to assess the student's skill level with this exact college readiness course below here. That student, of course, didn't perform so well, and that's why you see the skills that are populated here are all of those skills that were tested within the student's incorrectly answered questions. Under each of those skills, content similar to that you saw in the Skill Surfer is brought to the forefront for the student. This includes, again, mini quizzes, text lessons, video lessons, practice tests. A whole lot of content is brought to the forefront for the user based on the skills they specifically struggled in. So for example, let's say I performed really well in these first 5 sections, from order of operations all the way through to square roots, for example. Then these would all be omitted for me, and I would only see content beginning from decimals and on, only the content that's specific to what I struggled in. In fact, I can click on the View Results area up here to see the results of my diagnostic exam and those exact tests, or excuse me, those exact skills that were tested within the questions I got wrong. So yeah, in particular, if you have any users who are either, again, returning to college after a long break or might want to brush up on some of those basic skills for college readiness, the Leap Learning Platform is a great place to send them to, especially because the content that's made available for them is customized to their needs, and they'll be able to work in a process that works more efficiently for them. Heading back on through to the academic tools, I'd like to skip ahead briefly to the language lab just over here. This is your students' one-stop shop for any language assistance they might be looking for. And that actually includes live help language tutoring. So for example, if instead of a Spanish-speaking tutor in math or science, for example, if your student needed assistance in Spanish, for instance, they could actually get that live language assistance from one of our Spanish tutors through the language lab here. Students can simply choose their subject, again, check their tutor availability and preferences, and then get live help just like the live help area. And we'll be able to view all the playbacks for these language lab sessions similarly through the My Past Sessions area. There's very little difference in those tool sets at all. It's just that we wanted to make sure the language lab was a single stop for any language purposes, and that includes tutoring, and as you'll see in just a moment, content through our vocabulary builder tool just down here, also known as the word layer tool. This is essentially a language-based skill server and provides content for all the different languages that you see here, including tests, lessons, quizzes, and even pronunciation guides for each of the languages you see with one of the speaking person icons beside them. And so yeah, again, the Language Lab is a one-stop shop for any language assistance your students might be looking for, so do feel free to send them there. Beyond that, heading back through the academic tools, we have a couple of ancillary features here for students that, in particular, I found really works really well well, let me jump into Flashbulb in particular. I kind of get excited talking about this one for a number of different reasons, but in particular, Flashbulb is an area that your students can go to both create and view flashcards. That could be pretty useful in and of itself. Students can create flashcards by clicking on the create link up here and edit or organize any sets they have created through their dashboard. They can even organize those sets into the different subject categories you see below, and even share those sets publicly with other Flashbulb users. Instead, you can also head on into any one of these categories you see below and access vetted content from Brainfuse's own content managers and other Flashbulb users, where you can look through their flashcard sets. So for example, anything with the check mark you see here has been expert approved by one of Brainfuse's content managers, and you can take a look through at any of these sets of cards as you'd like. But the reason I got excited and tripped my words up, and the real reason I love to point out Flashbulb on webinars, is that you can, in addition to taking a look at the flashcards, you can also convert any of those sets of flashcards, whether your own or anyone else's, into any of the studying games that you see below here. So in that case, that includes crossword puzzles, matching column games, or even this sort of caterpillar-like game called Hungry Bug down here, which I found, at least personally, works really well with math and science flashcards, for example. So yeah, this is an especially great tool to point to students if they're looking for something on Brainfuse that is a little more fun than usual, might kind of help them shake up the routine or monotony of their studying. And if, yeah, they're looking to study on Brainfuse, but in a way that's a little different than usual, might be a little more fun than usual, then Flashbulb is an especially great place to point them to. With that in mind, another tool made available through the academic tools is eParachute, although not exactly academic in nature. In fact, for folks on the webinar who happen to be familiar with the book, What Color is Your Parachute already, then you may already have some idea of what this tool is. But if not, that's perfectly fine. It was most certainly not a requirement today. With that, eParachute is essentially a digital version of one of the exercises of the career assessment book, What Color is Your Parachute? In particular, this tool, the digital version of that exercise, is primarily built to pair students to the careers that best suit them. So to do that, they ask the user a series of questions: the types of work that interests them, the people they see themselves working with or as, fingers crossed that's an executive role, of course, the fields they're working in, whether that's public service, STEM, the arts, education, whatever it might be. From there, when the student completes these different questions, which are often posed in different formats, from prioritizing multiple choice questions to short answer responses, once completed, the student will be given a profile by eParachute that not only pairs them with the several different careers that best suit them based on their responses, ranked by the priority of those responses, but also resources on where they can begin to research those exact jobs and their requirements, job websites where they can begin applying to those jobs and building resumes tailored to those positions and what kinds of experiences might be useful for those resumes, and even a number of other options, including researching different advanced degree programs throughout the country if your career requires a more advanced degree. So yeah, with that in mind, any of your students who at this point in their academic career might be a bit curious about what their professional career will hold, but don't really know where to start asking the right questions, eParachute removes the work for them by asking the questions for them. From there, the last two tools available under the Academic Tools section, the Meet Virtual Study Room and the Brainwave tool, both of these actually use versions of the Brainfuse whiteboard to give your students a little more expanded options than they might otherwise get from just a live help session. So the Meet Virtual Study Room, for instance, is an area that your students can go to organize their own whiteboard sessions. In fact, they can invite anybody they'd like to these sessions. So these are particularly useful for students who might be, as of course many folks might be familiar in the days of distance learning being commonplace, many students would resort to using Zoom and other platforms to have studying sessions with their friends when they couldn't do so in person. So with that in mind, the Brainfuse Meet tool makes sure that those students have access to a similar tool, but with academic features in mind key. So with that, you'll have all access to the same tools and features of the Brainfuse whiteboard and that full interactive space, but for anybody that you'd like to invite. So to begin a Meet session, all you do is title it as you might like, and then you begin inviting participants in this first field here. And to do so, all you need to do is enter the email addresses of the folks you'd like to invite. And the pro tip there is that those folks don't even need to be other Brainfuse users. They can be professors, they can be folks, students who have not yet accessed Brainfuse before, but would like to see what it looks like so that the student can kind of show them the interactive whiteboard and work in a studying session with them. There's a lot of different uses for the Meet Virtual Study Room. But with that, you can organize the date, time, and duration of your session, and even include any notes or descriptions you might like to in this final step. Once you click on send, those in the participants field here will each receive unique emails with links to click along with the dates and times for the session. And you as the organizer can instead head on into the My Calendar area under your account features to see any sessions you've scheduled. You'll see them all included here, along with the attendees information and any notes you included, and you'll have the links to edit, enter, or cancel these sessions anytime straight through here. You can even add a new session straight from the My Calendar page as well, if you'd like to. And so finally is the Brainwave tool, another tool that uses a version of the Brainfuse whiteboard. The key difference is that the Brainwave tool actually uses a kind of single user version of the whiteboard. And so in this case, the Brainwave tool is especially useful as a note-taking tool or a video-making tool, essentially, using the whiteboard. And just to show you how that works, I'm going to go ahead and click on Create a Brainwave here. You'll see a set of tips and general directions and instructions for how you can best use the Brainwave for your purposes here. But you'll see once I click on Begin Recording, I'm brought into an almost identical whiteboard to the one we had our live help session in. Except the key is it's just me in here. So if I'd like to, I can put a problem on the whiteboard, a math problem for instance, and then work on it step by step, describing each of the steps in the chat area and just kind of working in the interactive space as I'd like to. From there, once I click on stop, this video will then be saved into the Brainwave library for me just underneath here. And with that, I can share any of these Brainwave videos that I create to anybody I'd like to with a valid email address just by clicking on this link right here. Now, there's a little known workaround with the Brainwave tool that is especially useful and I really like to point out on webinars. So just so folks are aware, as a student, if you head on into My Past Sessions area under your account features, you can actually convert any of these past sessions that you've had on your account into a Brainwave by clicking on this link just here. That will then allow you to send off the full video playback of the live session that you had to anybody that you'd like to. So if you'd like to show a professor a session you had with a tutor, but the chat area is really not enough context to show the professor all the work you did on the whiteboard, all the progress you made in that interactive space, then converting that session into a Brainwave and then heading on into the My Brainwaves area under your account features will allow you to share that off with that professor in its full playback format easily anytime. And so last but not least, the final of Brainfuse's account features to go over today, and certainly one of our most useful, is the My Cloud Pack area just here. This is essentially a small take on a cloud storage service available for Brainfuse users. And so any of your students who'd like to can save their files directly to their Brainfuse account. These can be organized into different folders as I've created here, just for the sake of example, and anywhere the student logs in, they'll have access to those files directly to then share in their live help sessions, in their language lab sessions, or in their Meets virtual study room sessions with their peers, or to submit to the EFC tutors through the writing lab. So wherever a student goes, no matter where they are, these files will follow them around wherever they go. So instead of students always having to access Brainfuse on the same device or in the same location, or for the students who are really on the go and working on this tutoring in a number of different locations, the Cloud Pack is going to be especially useful for them, so that those files they need are available to access wherever they are, so they don't have to bring a flash drive with them or always access Brainfuse on the same device. It'll be where they are when they log in directly. All right. And so I believe, all things considered, that about covers everything that we had prepared to go over on today's Brainfuse webinar. So again, I wanted to just take a moment to thank you all for jumping on today, taking the time out of your day to attend our Brainfuse session. I appreciate your patience with getting everything started and listening to the preamble, and we really appreciate you taking the time to listen today. Again, the EFSC team really worked hard to make sure that Brainfuse was the choice they made because it was so customizable and modal in a sense. And so with that, we made sure that the EFSC Writing Lab was especially suited to the EFSC tutors. That way your students are getting expert assistance from your tutors in areas that our tutors, although they may be able to help, wouldn't be able to provide that same level of personalization and expertise. With that, in conjunction with our live help tutoring closed off during the times of your academic success centers hours, there are a lot of different ways that Brainfuse has made sure that this program is really custom made and tailored to EFSC tutors, faculty, and other team members. And so just with that out of the way, thank you again for jumping on the webinar today, folks. If you did have any questions in the meantime, please do not hesitate to let me know.